Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance and asks, what has been the total cost to date of extending and implementing the government's asset sales program, which it calls the mixed ownership model?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, as I said in answer to a similar question last month, the total amounts of the contracts are commercially sensitive because the government intends to renegotiate those contracts for each partial share offer. I can confirm that about $1.1 million has been paid out so far pursuant to communication, marketing, market research and advertising services. But I would say to the member, the government has been quite open about the potential costs of the program. These are expected to be about 2% of the total program proceeds, which by any market standard is quite low. Other share floats generally have costs somewhere between 3 to 7% of total proceeds.
Dr Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does the figure of $1.1 million so far include all the costs of the asset sales policy, including contracting for advertising and communications, banks and share brokers, legal advisors, independent advisors, policy work conducted by the public service and activities not covered by the appropriations within vote finance, such as pre-sale preparation by the energy companies, work conducted by government departments other than Treasury and the Waitangi Tribunal hearing costs?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, no it doesn't. It refers to the amount that's been paid out under the kind of contracts that the member has referred to in the past. I must say, though, that a good deal of the public service activity has been very useful because it's shown up aspects of the operations of the companies that can be improved. In the case of Maori rights and interests, it's flushed out a number of issues, some of which should have been resolved some time ago and haven't been, others of which have been publicly discussed. So that expenditure I would regard as pretty useful, even if there was no sale.
Point of order, Dr Russel Norman.
Mr Speaker, the primary question that was put down was general. It said, what has been the total cost to date? It didn't refer just to the contracting costs around advertising and communications. It also referred to all costs, including the public service work. The Minister has just confirmed in his answer there that his answer to the primary did not include those other costs, and yet this was a question set down on notice. It didn't specify just advertising and communication. It was very broad.
Order. I listened to the Minister's answer very carefully, and what he said was that some of the costs relating to certain contracts were considered commercially sensitive, and he did not believe it was in the public interest to identify all of those. With respect to departmental costs, it's possible the Minister interpreted those the way many would, that the departmental officials have to be paid anyhow, and there's no particular additional cost depending on what work they're doing, and it's not often in costing projects like this that the departmental costs are included. If the member had wanted that to be included in such a figure, maybe he should have been more specific in the question. Supplementary question, Dr Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can the Minister of Finance then provide us with the true cost of the total, including departmental costs, of preparing the asset sale program and implementing this policy agenda from the government?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, depending what the member means by the true cost, I mean, we can certainly provide over time the direct costs of the share float. I suppose if we were going to take a broader view of what the costs are, then we would need to also weigh that up against the benefits of improving the operation of the companies and getting on and resolving outstanding Maori claims that have been brought to the fore by this process. I mean, because those are clearly benefits to the government and to the country.
The Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Given that the Prime Minister has conceded there could be a delay in the float of Mighty River Power, does he think it is wise to continue spending hundreds of thousands of taxpayers' dollars and potentially millions on the asset sales process when a change in circumstances, such as a legal challenge, could mean that much of the work would have to be repeated and or amended, costing the taxpayer further hundreds of thousands of dollars or potentially millions of dollars?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, as the member will know, the statements made by the Prime Minister indicate that it's possible the share sales could be delayed. That is yet to be proven. We haven't had the conclusions of the Waitangi Tribunal. We haven't had anyone rebut the government's proposition that the sale of shares does not compromise its ability to deal with iwi claims. So we've yet to see whether there can be successful claims in the tribunal, and then yet to see whether there can be a successful court action. The likelihood of that is there. It's probably low. We're proceeding with the pre-sale process.
Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Has the Minister sought any advice, any official advice, on the impact on the asset sales revenue of the uncertainty created by potential court action over water rights, and if so, what advice has he received?
The Honourable Bill English.
I don't think we've asked specifically for that advice. There has been some discussion about it. One indication of the potential impact on value, I'm advised, is that there's been no change in the share price of Trustpower or Contact Energy, both of which are operating in the same markets as the SOEs and potentially interested in the same kind of claims. So, we have confidence that the process we've been involved in for the last 2 or 3 years of discussing these matters with Maori is a process that can lead to a solution, and that tribunal claims and court actions are unlikely to make solutions more achievable.
Dr. Russell Norman.
Supplementary. Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does the Minister concede that there could be a cost on energy companies as a result of the recognition of iwi rights to water, and that would impact on the profitability of those companies were such a recognition to be followed through in the courts or through an agreement between Crown and iwi? And so that should be factored into how much he thinks he's going to raise by selling the companies.
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, no, I don't concede that. And the member is asking these questions as if these issues are all new. In fact, they aren't. One of the first actions of this government was to renegotiate the Waikato River settlement, which is a settlement over the freshwater claims related to the river with more dams on it than any other river in New Zealand. That settlement did deal with Tainui's rights and interests and had no impact on the operation of the electricity companies that have dams on that river.
Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does he agree with the Prime Minister that as many as 3 asset sales could occur in the coming year or two, in light of Forsyth Barr research showing that the asset sales would need to be spread out over 5 years to let the capital markets absorb them and maximise the revenue to the Crown?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, look, people will have their own views about it. It's our view that in the light of the fact New Zealanders are saving more than they have in the last 20 or 30 years, and that they're paying down debt because of record low interest rates, that there will be a large pool of cash and demand for these floats, and the government as it goes will make decisions about the timing of them, but we're a bit more optimistic than Forsyth Barr.
Dr. Russell Norman.
Supplementary. Thank you, Mr Speaker. Given that the government has stated that sales would not go ahead if market conditions were unfavourable, has the government determined what conditions would be unfavourable, and if so, what are they?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, no, we haven't determined what conditions would be unfavourable. You can imagine various scenarios, some positive, some negative. The fact that interest rates are the lowest they've ever been is probably tending to increase the value of utility companies. On the one hand, on the other hand, if there was some serious meltdown in Europe and financial markets shut down, then clearly that would be negative. But those are judgments we would make closer to the time.
Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given the risk created by uncertainty over water rights, the cost of an accelerated sales program and the continuing volatility in share markets, isn't the fiscally responsible course of action for the government to suspend asset sales at this time?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, not for those reasons on their own. The fact is all of those conditions apply regardless of the sale. Maori have asserting rights and interests in water. Now, whoever owns those companies, those rights and interests would need to be resolved. If there's uncertainty generated by those claims, then there would be uncertainty for SOEs or for 51% owned, government-owned SOEs. So the fact that Maori have made claims makes, in that sense, no difference to who owns them. If there's uncertainty there for the government, for the private investors, there's uncertainty there for the government, and those claims are ones that we're focused on resolving, as we have resolved a number of them in the last couple of years, and we're continuing to discuss the outstanding claims.
Question number, I beg your pardon, supplementary question, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Can I ask the Minister, if he is so confident of New Zealand mums and dads having sufficient savings to take up the share offer, why on earth is he floating these shares on the Australian market?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we aren't.
Question number 3, David Bennett.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the